Welcome to the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo, your host for this behind-the-scenes look at PETA, the largest animal rights organization in the world. Here we talk to the key players at PETA and the movement and ask them about how animal rights change their lives and how they stay motivated to make the world a better place for the animals. On today's episode, PETA aids a local animal rescue group when told about a starving, abused horses situation near the Grand Canyon National Park.
We were approached by a group who was working to improve conditions for horses there. It's a group called Save Havasupai Horses. And they told us about this horse who had collapsed on the trail and was so weak and emaciated that he couldn't get up. And instead of coaxing and encouraging him, providing him with shade and water, the horse wrangler reportedly kicked him in the face. He was skin and bones, and you can see why he collapsed. He was so weak.
The horse was named Teardrop, just one of the many animals used to carry supplies for a pricey outdoors excursion that literally is enabled on the backs of dozens of abused horses. Pictures of Teardrop and other emaciated horses made the issue hard to ignore, but people have until now.
And I think what's really horrifying is that people have reported that they have seen horses who have collapsed and then have been abandoned right there on the trail, and they're just left to die. If you've got any heart in you at all, you cannot see a bone-thin horse lying on the ground with probably 60 pounds of gear strapped to his bony back and not be so terribly touched by that.
Saving the Havasupai horses of the Havasu Canyon in Arizona on this episode of the PETA Podcast. But first, thanks again for joining us here at the PETA Podcast. Share a link with your friends and let them know the animals have a voice on the PETA Podcast. Go to our webpage at PETA.org and listen to all the episodes. There's the first episode with PETA President and co-founder Ingrid Newkirk, who debunks all the myths you've heard about PETA and animal rights. Want to know more about why animal experimentation is a waste of money and animal lives? Check out episode 20, The Killing Labs, and episode 11, Vivisection Hell. Think SeaWorld has learned anything after the movie Blackfish? Then why is there no move to provide sea sanctuary for orcas like Corky? Episode 21 has some answers. Listen to all our episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you download podcasts. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, don't forget to rate and review the show. It helps the algorithm know that PETA has a podcast on the issues you care about. If you really want to help the animals, you can always hit the Donate Now button at PETA.org. And if you're high-tech and have Amazon's Alexa, it's as easy as saying, Alexa, donate to PETA. And now to our episode. Kathy Guillermo is PETA's Senior Vice President, overseeing a number of areas. I talked to her about how PETA began working with a local animal rights group, Save Havasupai Horses, and how it helped put a spotlight on the abuse on the edge of the Grand Canyon. Saving the Havasupai Horses on the PETA Podcast. How did you get involved in dealing with pack horses in the Grand Canyon area? What are pack horses?
Well, pack horses are horses who carry gear for people who are hiking. In this case, they're hiking in the Havasu Canyon region in Arizona near the Grand Canyon. And we got involved because of a horse named Teardrop. We were approached by a group who was working to improve conditions for horses there. It's a group called Save Havasupai Horses. And they told us about this horse who had collapsed on the trail and was so weak and emaciated that he couldn't get up. And instead of coaxing and encouraging him, providing him with shade and water, the horse wrangler reportedly kicked him in the face. There were witnesses who saw Teardrop collapse and saw what happened to him afterwards, and they reported it to Save Havasupai Horses, who got in touch with us. And so we put this information out on our website, and we encouraged people to send emails to the Bureau of Indian Affairs and to the tribe itself, and we asked for Teardrop to be taken from his role as a pack horse there. And that ultimately did happen, and Teardrop was saved.
So describe again what Teardrop did as a pack horse. What describe his life and how you found him.
These horses are used strictly for taking gear that belongs to tourists up and down this 10-mile switchback trail that goes from the top of the canyon, which is an offshoot of the Grand Canyon, down to what's called Havasupai Falls. And at the bottom of the canyon is waterfalls and a camping area. This is all tribal land. It's owned by the Havasupai tribe. And people will pay a good deal of money to camp down in that campground during the season that it's available. And what they do is hire these outfitters to take their gear down for them. And most often this is done on horseback. There isn't a way to get the gear down the canyon other than by horseback or by helicopter at this point. So these horses' roles are entirely to take food and gear up and down this canyon so that gourmet meals for these tourists can be fixed at the bottom of the canyon and all their gear can arrive there without them actually having to carry it themselves.
So this isn't exactly like people roughing it. This is, these horses are used to placate or to serve a kind of elitist type of situation.
I think that's a fair assessment. It's a very expensive trip to take. Tourists who go to the Grand Canyon area looking to do some hiking and some camping, they're the kind of people who would go to the Havasu Canyon. And it's very expensive. It's $1,000, $1,300 to do one of these trips down into the Grand Canyon or down into the Havasu Canyon overnight. So along with this comes the gourmet meals that are cooked for these people and the alcohol and the cooking materials. And all of this is hauled up and down this very steep switchback trail on the backs of horses.
So this isn't exactly like a roughing it expedition, but it is a roughing it ordeal for the horses.
Unfortunately, it is. And I think for many people, they are looking for a great long hike, a fun night camping, swimming in the lakes that surround the waterfalls there. It sounds idyllic, but what so many of them have found and have reported when they have come back from these trips is watching emaciated horses who can barely move struggle under heavy loads of coolers full of ice and food, being forced to trot and sometimes run up and down these very steep trails. They've seen horses who have collapsed, horses who have fallen off the sides of these trails and down into the canyon. And I think what's really horrifying is that people have reported that they have seen horses who have collapsed and then have been abandoned right there on the trail, and they're just left to die. So that as people and horses are going up and down this 8 or 10 mile long trail, they're seeing the bodies of horses who have died along the way.
So it's sort of like Everest in some ways, except a kind of a desert sort of Everest.
I thought of that too, because I understand that when one climbs Everest, you will see the bodies of people who have died making that trek. I think the difference, of course, is that the horses don't get to choose whether or not they risk their lives. And if they're going to be used in this way, at the very least, shouldn't they be given food and water and shade and decent treatment?
So this isn't just an isolated situation with Teardrop. Many horses are involved in this endeavor.
That's right. This is what we have learned from that organization, Save Havasupai Horses, and we understand that these complaints go back some 40 years, ever since people have been hiking down into the canyon and taking their gear with them, and then these outfitter companies and the tribe itself profit from this journey up and down this mountain. So this is long-standing, and the photos I have seen show many horses suffering. There was an incident just about 2 weeks ago in which 9 emaciated horses were photographed who were tied to rails at the top of the trail.
And this is something that's been ongoing, and why can't local authorities or state authorities or somebody try to stop this?
Well, local authorities don't have jurisdiction on tribal land. So this has fallen to activists in the area to pressure those who can make a difference, which is the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the FBI, and federal authorities to become involved. They've had some success with that. They have had a few people prosecuted for cruelty to animals, but it hasn't really changed the overall situation. The Bureau of Indian Affairs needs to take this much more seriously, and they need to enforce anti-cruelty laws, their own anti-cruelty laws, and they need to make sure these horses are cared for properly.
Now, because it is involving Indian lands, I mean, the Indian nation, it's a sovereign nation. This must be a kind of difficult thing for PETA to get involved in and fight, isn't it?
I find that whenever I see horses who are being starved and beaten and denied water and denied food, a very easy thing to get involved with. Is it easy to fix? I don't know about that, but I do know that more than 100,000 people participated in our action alert involving Teardrop, and those were 100,000 emails that went to the Bureau of Indian Affairs saying, take this horse and get this horse care, and that worked. So we're prepared to stick this out and do what needs to be done to get these animals the care that they need.
So if it weren't for the alerts that PETA members got, and then they sent the emails back to PETA, which then brought it to the attention of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Without that, this would still be ongoing?
Well, that's tough to say. There are local activists there who've done some amazing work over the last years and continue to do amazing work. And I like to think we helped their effort. And I'm sure that all those extra emails had a big impact. But I think working in concert with that organization, we've been able to make a little bit of change here. There's a lot more to do.
And so once again, what is a better way? Or is there a better way short of, say, shutting down the operation? Because it sounds like they probably don't want to do that. But what is the better way? I guess just more humane treatment of horses, I guess.
Well, that's a start. I do think that anytime someone is thinking about going on vacation, if there's an activity involving animals anywhere in the world, just don't do it. Just don't. Animals are so easily exploited, and anytime they're used in this way for profit, it's probably better to stay far away. From the camels and the donkeys at Petra in Jordan to the elephants in India who are used for rides, these animals suffer so terribly. So my first advice is, please just don't do it. Find another way. That said, there are really much better ways of getting gear down, even on the backs of horses, than is being done now. The Grand Canyon itself has a mule concession, they call it, in which the mules carry the gear down for those tourists. And it is run in a much more humane way. First of all, they feed the animals, which is a big improvement over the starvation that we've seen on the tribal lands. The animals have mandatory rest periods. They have limits to the weights that they can carry, and there are scales at the top of the canyon so that when the gear is put on the backs of the mules, they're then weighed. And if it's too heavy, some of that is taken off. So there are some strict rules that make life much easier. They also have gear on these mules so that if one mule should slip, they don't all fall down, whereas in the Havasu area, when one horse has fallen off the side of the canyon trail, a whole team of horses have gone down with them. So there are ways to do it better. Save Havasupai Horses has a list of demands on their website, and these involve things like making sure there is water at the top and the bottom of the trail, because, believe it or not, water has been denied to these horses.
What do they say when the horses obviously need water? What do the outfitters say?
Yes, it's incredible. And I think I should add here that the outfitters are the ones who hire contractors, and these contractors are the ones who have the horses. Some of the contractors are Native Americans and some of them are not, but the contractors are hired and then the gear is put on their teams of horses, and obviously there are some who are better than others. One outfitter actually said to me, I was told that let me not put it in his own words, but paraphrase, he said that he was told by a veterinarian that they couldn't put water at the top of the Havasu Canyon because it might help spread parasites. And I said, let me be clear about this. You're telling me that in 110-degree heat, after a horse has been forced to trot uphill for 10 miles, you're worried about spreading parasites? You do know that's insane, don't you? Can you not hear yourself talking? And I think at that point he was very embarrassed. But the bottom line is, too many of these outfitters just don't care. They just wanted to make sure the stuff gets to the top and then gets to the bottom and then gets back up to the top again. And that's all they're thinking about. So yes, believe it or not, it's only recently that the Bureau of Indian Affairs has insisted that water be put at the top of the trail for the horses. They also need corrals so that they're not tied up constantly when they're not going up and down these trails. And they need rest days. They need days off. This is grueling and difficult work. They should never be forced to trot. They need to be able to walk up and down these trails. They need to be weighed and not overloaded. They need proper veterinary care. It's all doable, but somebody has to make sure that it happens.
All right, now you mentioned a situation with the Grand Canyon mules and a different kind of concession. They're on federal lands versus the situation with Teardrop and the Indian lands. What's the difference? Just the jurisdiction, or is there a way that what would justify the difference in the actions in one place versus the other?
I think that's a very good question, and I'm not sure I know the answer to that, but I can tell you that a lot of it must have to do with commitment. The Grand Canyon Park has committed to making sure that these animals are treated well. And once they made that commitment, they put everything in place that ensured that that would happen. We have not seen that commitment at Havasu Canyon. And this is very much a profit-making enterprise. Millions of dollars flow into these tribal lands and into the pockets of the outfitters who are not part of the Native American tribe. Millions of dollars flow into their pockets from this every year. These tickets to go down into the Havasu Canyon are sold out within a matter of weeks every season. It's very highly in demand, I think largely because people simply don't know what they're going to find when they see these horses. So we have people who are more interested in money than they are in making sure that they do it right.
Now, tell us more about Teardrop, the horse that was apparently saved after the media and PETA was alerted. What is the status of Teardrop, the horse, right now?
Well, I'm happy to talk a little bit about Teardrop because Teardrop has a good development in his story. After we were notified by Save Havasupai Horses about his story, and we put the action alert up and we contacted officials, and he was then relinquished by the tribe under pressure to the Bureau of Indian Affairs. He went immediately to a veterinary hospital, and you can see the picture of Teardrop on our website at PETA.org. He was skin and bones, and you can see why he collapsed. He was so weak. He spent a month getting treatment at this veterinary hospital because in addition to being completely malnourished, he had pneumonia. So he was very, very sick. It's kind of miraculous that he survived, I think. And he has now been transferred to a horse rescue called Healing Hearts. And he has gained a good deal of weight. He's still very thin, but he looks so much better. And it will be, I think, many months before he's completely well. But he's never going to go back to that life as a pack horse. And that's a wonderful ending for Teardrop.
So that's a success story. But for every Teardrop, how many horses are we talking about that are exposed and threatened by the kind of conditions that are there?
Well, there are dozens and dozens of horses who are used for this, and you can see them at the bottom of the canyon on the tribal land. Many of them are tied up there. You can see them at the top of the trail as the gear is being loaded onto them. Part of the problem is that horses are not terribly expensive. They can buy horses cheaply, and it's cheaper to let a horse starve and die and then simply acquire a new one than it is to provide veterinary care, or at least that's the perception of these people who are running these wrangling operations. So it's a difficult situation, but I do think that with enough pressure, And if enough people stay away from the entire state of Arizona until this is cleaned up, that they'll be forced to provide them with care and to do the decent thing.
All right, so what can people do short of, well, I mean, you don't want them to engage or to do these trips down there in that Grand Canyon area. What can people do to take action?
You know, Arizona relies on tourism. And if that state and the officials in that state believe that their tourism is going to be affected by the bad reputation that Arizona has because of the treatment of these horses, I think that would do a lot toward putting pressure on the tribe, on the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and on these outfitters. So I would encourage people to go to the website of the Arizona Office of Tourism. That they can find that at tourism.az.gov, and we can put that up on our website and perhaps in the notes of this podcast. But at the bottom of this page, there's a place to email. And if everyone listening to this would email the Arizona Office of Tourism and say, I won't visit Arizona as long as these horses in the Havasu Canyon are suffering, that will do a lot to help. Many of the people who work on the advisory council of the Office of Tourism are people involved in the tourism industry itself. And the last thing they want is for people to stay away because of the way animals are treated. And we've seen again and again how the impact of tourists can help animals and we've seen that with SeaWorld, for example, how people have stayed away in droves because of the cruelty and the effect that has had on the SeaWorld concession.
And even in this case, already with the Teardrop situation, emails to PETA, and people can still take action at PETA.org as well. Those emails have meant something toward saving Teardrop.
It's all about communicating what you will and won't tolerate. And I don't think any decent person would tolerate this. I have seen so many emails from people who took this trip and had no idea what they were going to find and how shocked they were. I read one woman who was injured on the trail when she was hiking down, and to get her up, they actually put her on one of these pack horses. And she said she wept for the entire trip up the hill because she felt so bad for what she had seen these horses endure. You know, the rough treatment, the starvation, the hitting, the kicking, the abuse. And I've heard this again and again and seen the testimony of people who say they will never forget it. It haunts them even months after their trips.
And tell me the first time you saw the pictures. I mean, the pictures have been up on PETA.org for some time, and local media have done investigative pieces. And then of course, the local activism group there has done its part. But when you first saw these pictures, what were you thinking?
The only thing you can do when you see a picture like this, before you get angry and say, I'm not going to take this, I'm going to do all I can, I think the first thing that you can do, and the first thing that I did, was cry a little bit. If you've got any heart in you at all, you cannot see a bone-thin horse lying on the ground with probably 60 pounds of gear strapped to his bony back and not be so terribly touched by that. So I think looking at the pictures is important because I think that's the way to understand what's really going on here.
I think people are moved when they see that, but one of the things that comes to mind is that it seems so incredulous. It seems like, how can this happen? I mean, are we really seeing this emaciated horse being asked to carry these bags and packages that will serve, these affluent eco-tourists who are down there? It just seems unreal, really.
I think it does. This is the United States in the year 2018, and what we're saying is that horses are being loaded up with gear and abused. And it is surreal. It's hard to believe that's happening here. And this has been going on for probably 40 years, and I had no idea about it until about 2 months ago. So it's something that I hope everybody will think about and learn about, and certainly before they go to Arizona, have a say about this. Now,
there may be cynics out there who say, okay, look, I understand a few horses, we should be concerned, but is it a major league issue that we should be concerned about? I mean, I'm sure you might come up to people and say, look, this is sad. it's one thing, it's isolated, we saved Teardrop, let's not throw the book at these folks. They're well-meaning capitalists trying to do their job. Not to be an apologist for these people, but there may be some people say, okay, look, this is a small thing. I mean, how do you respond to something like that?
I don't think suffering of this magnitude can ever be called a small thing. Whether it's one animal or whether it's 1 million animals, the suffering is the same to each individual, and we have to do what we can to try to stop it. This is not an insoluble problem. We're not talking about something that has no fix. There's a fix, and it's been made available to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, to the tribe itself, to the outfitters that are supporting this, and they all don't want to deal with it. So when there is no excuse, when we can do something, I think we are obligated to do something. And even if that something is sending an email and saying, I'm not going to the state of Arizona until you clean this up, that's something, and that's important.
Kathy Guillermo, Senior Vice President at PETA, and as previously disclosed on previous episodes, also my wife. For more on the Havasupai horses, go to PETA.org and check out the links and the pictures there. Also, the links on today's podcast notes. And that's our program for today. Contact us at PETA.org. You can find me on Twitter at Emil Amok, that's EMILAMOK, or on amok.com, amok.com. Once again, thank you for listening. Check out all our episodes on Apple Podcasts where you can rate and review the show. It helps get the word out about the issues you care about. And don't forget, you can help the animals and PETA, especially if you have Amazon's Alexa. Just say, Alexa, donate to PETA. Our music is provided by Carbonworks. Check them out on YouTube. And join us again next time for more insight into animal rights and the fight for a cruelty-free world on the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo.